name's Amanda Hanson. I have a rescue called Shelter Dogs with Jobs. We rescue working breed dogs from the shelter system or owner surrenders and find them a forever home with a career. This is Brando. He's my personal dog. He's a service dog. He was rehomed 7 times before I got him, and now he's a migraine alert dog for me. Some of you already met Huck. He's the big bloodhound down here in the front row. He is also my dog. He is a rescue, and he does search and rescue and therapy dog work. You guys are welcome to visit with him afterwards. Brando's working, so you cannot pet him. So Tara asked me to talk about survival. It's a little bit of a non-traditional topic, dog rescue with more creative people, but I do have a creative background, and I've kind of used that to influence the way I rescue dogs. All of us that are here are somewhat creative. We've come this way, either a traditional path, we've gone to school for artwork. Some of us have kind of had to fight to be creative. Some of us kind of just stumbled into it. I know a couple of people that I'm friends with here started off in a very different career, went to school for something else, and then ended up using their creativity to survive. Just a little bit about my survival story. I've gone to school for a long time. I went for art, business, most recently law. I graduated with a law degree, and a few weeks before I was supposed to take the bar, I got in a car accident, and I had neck, back, and brain injuries, and I've been unable to take the bar. I had a job secured with an animal law practice. I was going to practice animal law full time. I haven't been able to do that. While I was studying for the bar, I was working as a dog trainer, something that I've done for a long time, just as a way to make money to study for the bar. And so I continue to do that. I've actually been able to turn it into a very successful business, and also start giving back through rescue. So I've still been able to survive and fulfill my purpose to help animals. Not in the courtroom like I planned, but I'm able to kind of evolve what I'm doing and still find my purpose with my passion. I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and around the time I started training here, I started also taking our shelter's kind of problem dogs. I would take them one at a time, rehabilitate them, find them a job to do, and somebody that would give them a chance to do it. These were dogs that would literally die without a job. They had been returned to the shelter multiple times. They were getting into trouble at home. I would help them find their purpose, find them a home that would help them reach their potential. These are all dogs that kind of failed because they had been in a traditional pet home. They had been objectified, overindulged. They kind of were the traditional American pet. We turn our dogs into these little freeloaders. We like to spoil them, buy them things, not give them anything to do, which, a lot of dogs evolve to like that. They love it, it's nice, but some dogs really don't like it, and they start getting frustrated, they struggle. So I get approached a lot with the dogs that are a problem. I get calls, oh, my dog bit, a kid in the face, it should be a police dog. Not really. I try and tell people, if just because your dog's aggressive doesn't mean it could be a police dog. If you're tracking a dangerous felon, the last thing you need is a dog that will turn around and attack you just as soon as the bad guy. So the dog does need a useful skill. It needs to be able to take something and apply it. Just having energy alone doesn't really help the dog. It certainly helps when combined with drive and focus and some other things, but it can't just have behavior issues. It needs to have a useful skill. Usually when we get it, it's either been squashed a little bit. People are trying to fit them into this like fur baby bubble, and they're not doing well with it, so sometimes we have to redevelop it. Other times it's just there and raw, and we have to kind of give them some guidance and help them hone in on it to work. The dogs also need to be able to work with people reasonably well and be around other dogs. We've had dogs come across that were very good at using their nose to find things, but if they're too aggressive with people, they can't be a good partner and they can't survive. So the dogs need to work well with other people. The dogs that are service dog candidates, even if they're very good at picking up on some sort of medical disability, if they don't get along with other dogs, they can't do it. So it's a very specific type of dog that we can help, but the shelters are full of them. It's all these dogs that are incredibly frustrated in these bad situations. Not that they were necessarily abused, it was just a really bad fit. People misjudge, they see a dog that's out, well behaved, they fall in love with the breed, the idea of the breed, the looks of the breed, they buy it and realize that they got more than they bargained for. The other thing these dogs need is an advocate, someone to get them the respect they need to do that job. That's where I come in. I take these dogs, I see their talent, I build on it, I reach out. I work with my friends in law enforcement, the dog training community, the shelter community, and I cross these bridges and I help make these connections where there's traditionally a disconnect. There's a lot of fighting between working dog people and rescue people, because working dog people tend to be pro-breeder, pro-responsible breeder, and a lot of rescue people are well-meaning, but they say the popular phrase, adopt, don't shop. So there's automatically this distrust of each other, and I've really worked to bridge those people together, open up the conversation, and help these dogs find homes, not only from the working side, dogs that aren't cut out for the job. I can help them find pet homes, but then also dogs that are in a regular rescue situation, I can help them find a job. And I'm not the only person that advocates. We have people that foster for us. There are foster trainers. It is up to them to really tell me what's going on with the dog. The advocate isn't only to speak for the dog and be like, look how awesome they are. That person's also to be very honest about what the dog is. We do not want to put a dog in a situation where they're not good at it. We've had plenty of bloodhounds come through our rescue that are not search and rescue candidates. They're not a dog that I would trust if I had a child or a loved one lost in the woods. They're the right breed, they may have a good temperament, but if they're not cut out for the job, it's our job as their advocate to not force them to try and do it. So that's a very important aspect of what we do. Many of the dogs that come in are totally overqualified. I'm sure some of you guys have been in jobs where you're way too qualified for what you're doing. It's frustrating, you get bored, you might know more than your boss, and you start having these kind of battles and frustration. It's very similar with these dogs that need a job. If I have a Belgian Malinois that's dying to go find drugs or go catch a ball or just, jump around and do something. Like, that dog will never be happy no matter how many bones I give it, how many toys I give it, how many days at doggy daycare I sign it up for. These dogs will just not be happy if they're doing something that's too simple for them. So we take in a lot of dogs that they're just never bred or meant to be, these decorative dogs we have, or, dependent on humans. The current American dog culture, we've kind of had the luxury of not needing these dogs to work anymore. When dogs were originally domesticated, we kept the ones and fed the ones that would protect us, that would hunt with us, that treated us well. They served some sort of a purpose, companionship being one of them, but in our current culture, companionship is the main thing we want, and we've kind of lost respect for everything else that the dog is. I see a lot of these dogs, and we've essentially turned them into our adult children that never move out of our basement, or like a trophy wife. And there's plenty of dogs that like that. There's probably plenty of people that would be fine, living off someone and having free food and not having to work. And there's, I guess, some men or women that would be happy to just look cute and say yes all the time and get along with everybody. And there are dogs for that, and there are people for that. And if that's your job, bless your heart, because that's really hard. But we've given that job to every single dog. That would mean like every person in this room is not really working, doing what they want to do. They are, kind of forced to live by someone else's rules. And yeah, you're taken care of. You may even have a really nice life. But how many people here would really be satisfied doing something like that? There's nothing wrong if you would. But that's what we've asked these dogs to do, and the behavior problems start to crop up. We're seeing dogs getting frustrated, fighting back, not wanting to say yes all the time, not wanting to get along with everyone we introduce them to. We expect our dogs to like all our friends, like all their dog friends, go everywhere, wear these outfits, look cute all the time, never ruin the furniture, like all these really demanding things, expecting these dogs to be perfect. And if we're compounding that with the dog that was bred to bite, run, kill, beat things up, be loud, be destructive, that we've bred them for a function, we're setting them up for failure. Let's see. So as creatives, we kind of have the power to advocate for our purpose and keep ourselves relevant, either by becoming self-sufficient or by being able to make ourselves very useful to others. Sorry, did anyone hear all that stuff I just said? Okay. Let's see. So, as we do that for ourselves, we are also, have this obligation to speak up for these animals and do the same. We need to respect their purpose and not try and save them from the very thing that made them relevant to our lives to begin with. There's a big movement right now fighting pet ownership. PETA is behind a lot of it, but there's some other organizations that don't have as big of an agenda, but they kind of have this idealistic thing that there's some farm somewhere where all these dogs can go live and be happy, and they won't have to work anymore. They won't have to chase bad guys or find drugs. Or here the big thing is the greyhound race tracks. People want all these greyhounds to quit racing, quit being enslaved by these trainers, in their mind. But the problem is there's nowhere for these dogs to go without a job. The quote behind me is written by John Katz. He's a very good modern animal advocate with a working animal background. And this was actually from an article he wrote about horse rescue. There was a movement a while back to get rid of slaughterhouses in the United States. Everybody fought for it. And there became all these horses with nowhere to go. Horses that were traditionally humanely slaughtered and given another purpose in the end, had that purpose taken away. They were then given to well-meaning but underfunded rescue groups who took them, couldn't feed them, they started to starve. They sold them at auction, and all these horses that were loved animals, working farm animals, competition animals, all that had had some importance became these $100, $200 animals with no name that were put on a truck and brought to Canada or Mexico and ended up in a slaughterhouse anyway. So we've kind of made horses irrelevant to our culture, and because of that, they're disappearing. We just think that they're all on this farm somewhere where they're being fed and loved and running free, but that doesn't exist. The best way for us to save animals is to keep them relevant, keep them active in our lives, keep their purpose alive, respect who they are. Don't try and make every animal somebody's pet. There's certainly a place for that. My working dogs are obviously well loved. There are some dogs that are specifically bred to just sit on your lap and be cute, and there's nothing wrong with getting that. That's certainly an important purpose and a luxury that we've been able to have in our culture. But the best way to keep animals healthy, alive, and with us on this planet is to actually give them a purpose, give them something to do, respect who they are. So just to kind of tie that in with our own purpose, we, as I mentioned before, we can either be self-sufficient entirely, or we can learn to become useful to others. Now, everybody had a question: what dog breed would you be if you were trying to survive? Who here said Jack Russell? Anybody? Nobody. How about northern breeds, like a husky or a Malamute? Okay, so those are pretty self-sufficient dogs. That as a dog trainer, I get calls about them saying, "Oh, well, they don't need me for anything," they really don't, and they really do kind of look up at us and see us as a hindrance to them. In our modern world, we do serve a purpose. We keep them from being hit by cars and doing stupid husky things or stupid Jack Russell things, but they are animals that in a proper environment would probably be very good at surviving on their own. Who here put like a hunting or a herding dog, like a Labrador, Vizsla? So those dogs are traditionally very good at working with somebody. Most people with a lab, if you turned it loose in the woods, it may do okay, but it would probably be better off working with a person, and they kind of create this symbiotic relationship with humans. So if you're that type of person, you really need to hone in on your skills as working with others, presenting your skills and making yourself useful and relevant, and working as a team. It's not just about you, it's about what you can do with the person, and neither does well. If you're out hunting and the dog doesn't do well, the hunter doesn't do well, and vice versa. So if that's going to be the way to survive, you need to look at everything as a whole and really nurture that relationship and take care of yourself first and make sure you're in a healthy place. Sometimes in those positions, you tend to want to serve others. You're really good at pleasing, like all our Labradors out there are very friendly, willing to do anything. You just have to check yourself and make sure you're not putting yourself at risk of overdoing it for somebody else, because if you're not healthy, you're not going to be able to help someone else. I've learned that very quickly in rescue. You do have to learn to say no, you have to set boundaries, you have to learn to keep yourself healthy in order to continue helping everyone else and being sustainable. Now, did anyone say Border Terrier or Border Collie? Australian Shepherd? Okay. Why'd you guys pick that? Just curious. Okay. Why'd you get them? Just curious. Because they're cute and cool colors, and yeah. So that happens a lot. A lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, I need a husky. They have one blue eye and one brown eye, and they look like a wolf." And then you realize the last thing you wanted was a dog that was literally bred to run away from you as fast as it can and not give a shit what you say about it. So I hope at least if you get anything from this talk today, cover your eyes when you're looking at puppies, and don't just go for the superficial stuff. You may end up with a really high maintenance trophy wife, or you may end up with a little jerk that's just gonna not listen to you and make your life miserable, and vice versa. But to bring up the Border Collie or Border Terriers, those are dogs that have really balanced being able to fend for themselves, but they see the purpose in working with someone else. A Border Terrier is a very rare breed. I'm not surprised no one mentioned it, but they were actually specifically bred to be terriers who are typically nasty with other dogs and sometimes nasty with people. The Border Terriers were specially bred to run with hound dogs and get along with them. So they're very tenacious. They are still these super little ninja killers when it comes to killing vermin and things, but they're social. They get along well. They're not difficult. They love other dogs. They love people. So they've been able to make it on their own, but they see the benefit of working with others. And that's kind of where I see myself now. Like I'm very tough. I've been able to make it on my own. I've been through a lot of stuff, but I see the benefit in working with others, giving myself a little bit of a break and a little more security. So you can kind of think about, what kind of dog you'd be, and, be honest with yourself. If your answer was just because something was cute, like maybe look a little bit deeper and, wonder if you can survive in the world just on your looks. It's some of us can, not everyone wants to. But you really need to find a way to make your skills matter. If there's something that you love and you want to do, you have to find a way to make it marketable, make it something that someone wants. You don't want to be the dog that just bites babies in the face. You want to be, if you're the type of dog that bites, you want it to be with a purpose and, something that's useful to somebody and not just a liability. So just really focus on what you have to offer, what complements that. Really just figure out a way to dig in and make yourself relevant, and take care of yourself. Make sure that you really look out for yourself. Don't overdo it, and don't put yourself in a job that you're not happy with. I'm sure a lot of people here coming from a creative background, probably had parents saying, oh, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, you should go to business school. There are plenty of people in this room that are incredibly successful being creative. There's non-traditional ways to take your creativity and use it to survive. I took my creativity and instead of going and being a fine artist like I started, I actually applied it to something like law school, and I found a very creative way to practice law. I was going to be an animal lawyer and advocate for animals in a very, very creative way. And I'm still very interested in that. When that didn't work out, I continued to survive. I applied that same creativity, the same passion, and I applied it to rescuing dogs and saving dogs. So if you're passionate about something, you can make what you want to do work. And you just really have to fight for it. It's not been easy. With everything I've been through, I easily could have, moved back in with my parents, gotten, a 9-to-5 job that I was overqualified for, worked off the system. I chose not to do any of that. I chose to really dig in, and I was actually, through some unfortunate events, I think I was blessed to find something I was really passionate, really good at, and I know I'm making a difference now. So I encourage you guys to really look into yourselves and do the same. I think that's it. Good morning.
My name is Ruth. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say about working breeds.
Thank you.
Could you be more specific about what working breeds are? I mean, you've got a German Shepherd and a Bloodhound. Could you
There's
tell me
several.
what the rest are?
Yeah, good question. There's several different working breeds. There's the traditional AKC categorized working breeds, but it's generally the dogs that you see in a job. It's a hunting dog, it's a herding dog, it's a dog used to guard livestock. So there's not just one specific type of working breed. We do take mutts in our rescue. I've taken Chihuahuas and placed them as service dogs. Small dogs can do detection work. They're actually really great at it. You can pick them up and lift them into something, and they can go run around and find things. And they're cheaper to feed and easier to transport than, a bloodhound. So it's really more, for what we look for in a working breed, it's more a collection of qualities and drives, more so than a specific breed. Obviously, if we see a bloodhound in rescue, we try and pull that, because we know even if it's not a working dog necessarily, even if they're not going to be a star search and rescue dog or a police dog, there's still some quirks with the breed that we know we understand, and we'll try and place them in an appropriate home. But really, for me, the definition of a working dog is a dog that wants to do more. It needs some sort of a project, and usually something that involves helping people. That's traditionally what they've been domesticated for. Even something that's very independent, like, a Great Pyrenees or an Anatolian Shepherd that is literally raised and then thrown out in a field with sheep, and they may come in once a year for a rabies shot if they feel like it. They're an independent dog, but still a working breed. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So, what are some of the things? Sorry, you didn't see I was sneaky. So, first of all, that's a beautiful story, and thank you so much for being here today and for sharing that with us all. What are some of the things that we can do so that we don't just have trophy dogs at home? So, for those of us who have dogs and maybe want to help stimulate them a little bit more outside of the rescue before they melt their little brains from being pretty.
Yeah. So. That's a good question.
Well, that was his too, so we're going to share that.
Okay. Did you have anything to add to that while I?
No, that was pretty much it. Just now that I realize that I have a pet
That needs something more to do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great question. One of the big things we do in rescue is try and keep the dogs in the home. We really want the dogs to do well, preferably with their first family who fell in love with them and got them. So there's a lot of things that you can do with your dog. I say look for what they're doing wrong and find something appropriate to apply it to. So if your dog is digging holes constantly, there's something called earth dog, where these happy little trained rats go in a tube, and your little terrier or whatever you have can indulge in that instinct and dig under the ground, and they bark when they find the rat, and it's in a place where they're allowed to dig. That's a kind of obscure and messy sport, and it's for smaller dogs. But there's also something similar called barn hunt, where the same little happy rats are in their little tube that they can sit and breathe and eat in, and they hide it in a stack of hay, and the dogs dig through and use their nose to find it. And the rats are kept safe in this little enclosure. They're desensitized to the dogs, and then of course they pick dogs to do the sport that aren't gonna just sit there and shake the tube and terrorize the rat. But that can give your dog something to do. One thing I caution against is just exercise. The dog needs a balance of mental stimulation and physical stimulation. If you just sit there and throw the ball or take them to the dog park or take them to doggy daycare, they're going to be not the right kind of tired. I don't know if anyone here has kids, but if you take your kids to Chuck E. Cheese and they run around with no rules and they have too much sugar and they're just hellions for 4 hours, they're tired when you leave, but it's not a good tired. It's this cranky, sugar high crashing, bratty tired. You want your dog to be tired after swimming lessons or going hiking. So you try and balance something that's mental and physical with the dog. But there's a great number of classes now teaching a dog nose work, teaching a dog tracking, even just basic obedience for food. Just doing little things at home to give your dog some sort of incentive and value instead of plopping down a bowl of food. Make them learn a trick for it. Sit, shake, roll over, something fun. Something as little as just making them sit and wait instead of diving in and splattering kibble all over your kitchen does a great deal for making a dog, understand that they have a purpose and boundaries. What kind of dogs do you guys have?
I have two. I have a Jack Russell and a Pit Bull.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so they would probably really like barn hunt. That would be a good option. Tampa Bay is an incredibly dog-friendly area, so you're fortunate to have some outlets for them. But the Dog Training Club of St. Pete has some really good, affordable, just basic obedience classes to give you a good groundwork with your dog. Typically, you can't just go in and start a job with a dog. You have to have some sort of basis. So teach a rule system or reward system, and basic obedience is always a great place to start and is usually enough of a challenge. But I have cards too if you guys want to go a private training route. But I can also help hook you up with the right people to train with if you're interested in a sport or an activity. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you for your story too.
Thanks.
Did have a couple of questions. So how do we find a good fit, and what kind of questions do we need to ask ourselves when we're looking for a companion or a pet? And how do we become a little bit more aware of what our needs are?
Your needs as far as like what you need in a dog?
Right.
Okay. So my biggest thing is like, be honest with yourself. Like, if you're a couch potato, don't think a dog is going to change that. Like, it may if you're disciplined and the dog's annoying enough, but if you're really truly a person that likes to sit on the couch every Saturday afternoon, like, get a dog that will sit on the couch with you. One of the services I offer, as do many other trainers, is like a rescue shopping service where we kind of get to know you and elicit the correct answers out of you as to what you really need, and then we can either look at rescue or a responsible breeder and really find a dog that's a good match. So often people want something for the wrong reasons. Like, they'll say, oh, I want a puppy because I want it to be like good with everything and like good with my kids. But raising a puppy is really hard. And like, unless you're this master trainer, you're not going to teach your dog to be amazing with kids. You might end up doing more harm than good. So I recommend going with like an older dog that is already settled in their temperament, and you're not having to roll the dice with what you might get. But I would say go in with an open mind. A lot of people come in with very superficial criteria. They want, no shedding, which, is nice, but a lot of dogs that are marked as no shedding shed anyway. Some people want certain color or don't like certain things looks-wise, but I think if you focus only on looks, you end up sacrificing a lot of things, temperament and personality-wise. But, something can be found that fits. There's great non-shedding dogs with a variety of temperaments, but really just going in open-minded and being honest with what your needs are and also the needs of the specific dog you're looking at. I would really look into like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, don't just go to the AKC site where they're going to brag about everything great about the dog and try and sell you one. Like, look up like the horror stories and see like really what you're in for. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it led into another question.
Okay.
Well, most of it is, so we all get into this creative industry
Right.
in one way or another because we're trying to follow our passion.
Right.
But after a while, there's a degree of unhappiness that we
Right.
get to. So I guess the question was, how do we apply some of what you've learned over the years, or even when we're finding a companion or making a career decision? How do we apply that to ourselves?
So I would suggest changing the scenery. Like, I know it's scary to like leave something and do something else, but sometimes it's forced upon us, and you find out exactly how much more you had to grow. Some of us are brave enough to just like plunge in and be like, okay, I'm going to put my notice in freelance. And others of us like literally have to be hit by a car and change our paths. I'm going to pick on my boyfriend a little bit. He is a graphic designer, and he had all of his brushes from Photoshop like deleted. Like, they just disappeared one night, and he was like super pissed. But his work since then, since he had to go back in and find new brushes and new techniques, like his work's been phenomenal. So sometimes you just need to like cause a little upset, whether intentional or life just happening to you. But don't be afraid to be uncomfortable for a little bit if it's working towards something you really want. Like, find a different way to apply it. Find a way to be creative, even in a non-creative venue. I know I started off as a student of fine art. I went to Otis College of Art and Design and was doing like traditional design work and things, and like that didn't make me happy. Like, being, a like medium-sized fish in this big, huge pond, like, wasn't gratifying for me. So I found that applying my creativity in like a business field or something that wasn't as personal to me actually like suited me better. And then I came full circle and actually like was able to apply my passion and creativity to something like incredibly personal to me. Like, dogs are way more personal to me than my artwork or anything else. But I got comfortable enough with who I was as a creative person to be able to like apply it to something and still defend who I was and not like sell my soul for it, if that makes sense. Okay. Anyone else?
I
Thank
loved
you.
the quote that you shared, and I loved your stories. Thank you. And one of the things that you talked about having animals have relevance in our everyday lives. I really like that, but I am curious how we can be better at balancing finding relevance and finding jobs for animals with the roles that tend to be, more exploitative. Like, I love horses, and I love the idea of having working horses back in our lives, but I struggle with the idea of racehorses where they're pumped full of chemicals so that their lungs bleed, or follow, the carriage horses in New York. So how do we find relevance for them in this world that isn't always very conducive to their natural lifestyle?
So that's a good question. My big thing is not condemning a job as a whole, an industry as a whole. There are bad situations for individual animals no matter what. Like, there are people that are like god-awful pet owners. Like, that dog does not have a good quality of life, and they're just a pet. And there are people that have working animals, and they may even be in an industry that is, kind of demonized, but they're actually very caring, very fair, and their animals are very happy. I've seen that personally here with like the greyhound industry. They're demonized, but I know some of the kennel people. These dogs are like their babies. They take really good care of them. You never see a greyhound mix in a shelter. You never see these oops litters of, dogs that they were like, oh, you don't know how that happened. Like, they're actually a very responsible industry. Like, and yeah, it's sad and scary. Like, sometimes they break a leg or get injured doing something on the track. But like, we have dogs break legs like at the dog park. We have dogs break legs, rolling off your king size bed and like hitting their dog stairs on the way down. Like, you can't keep these animals in a bubble. It's almost worse to like shield them from their purpose. And the article that this is from, that John Katz wrote, was actually talking about how we are trying to shield horses from these industries. He's actually an advocate of the carriage horses. The majority of them are not overworked. They are well cared for, and they do enjoy the job. So I would say target the regulations in those industries and not just try and shut them down. Same thing with circuses and anything like that. Like, really get to know the industry. Don't just read, whatever's being shared on Facebook, whatever petition there is. Really look into it and see both sides, research it, and there's actually, more of a story there. And, some of it might make you sad, and some of it will actually make you go, oh, okay, well, I see that side of it. So I would really look into the different purposes and find a way to make it better. There's a lady named Temple Grandin. Are you guys familiar with who she is? So she's this wonderful animal advocate. She speaks on behalf of animals in like a really beautiful, creative way. Her paying job is to design slaughterhouses for cattle. Like, she's actually designed a way to make it more humane and more safe for them, and make it most comfortable for something that they're going to have to do anyway. So if we can kind of take that mindset and make it the best we can be for them and balance it, they're actually better off than us just like abolishing like their function entirely.
So first of all, I have to say it's amazing what you're doing, and
Thank you.
I'm very happy that everything worked out at the end.
Thank you. It's still a work in progress.
And I'm surrounded by a lot of dogs, and they seem to be so unhappy and unfulfilled. They are kind of more like stuffed animals.
Yeah.
And I try to bring a little bit of awareness to those dog owners in a subtle way, which didn't work out at all. So
Yeah.
do you have kind of an idea, how we can share that animals are dogs? Any animal is not a stuffed animal. They have their needs, they have their hopes, they need work, and yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some people that are just inherently selfish and they only get the dog as a status symbol or, something to indulge whatever needs they have, to have something cute in their purse or whatever. So sometimes you just can't get through to people like that. I found the best way to get through to like my clients who don't want to make their dogs do anything. Like I show them like, look how happy your dog is with this. Like give them this experience. It's, like sending your kid to summer camp or getting to do new things. Like the culture in America and St. Pete especially is this like culture where we want to like buy experiences for our dogs. People spend like a ridiculous amount of money to send their dog to like, a doggy daycare and spend an extra $20 a day for them to be in like, a 6-inch kiddie pool, with a bunch of other dogs, like, and in those same places, they'll pay extra to be like in a room with a couch and a TV. Like that's stuff that really doesn't matter to a dog. But honestly, most dogs hate being in those isolated rooms with the TV and the couch. They'd rather be out in the kennel. But people will indulge. And so if that's the kind of person they are, where they just want to buy like, $100 dress for their dog and push it in a stroller rather than like give it something to do, like I would try and frame it as like this luxury thing, like this experience that the dog gets to do. Be like, oh, your dog should go do nose work because it's like so exciting for them. Like make it something like, kind of appealing and like elite. And, you might appeal to some of those people. But I mean, honestly, some people just don't care, and you cannot let yourself get like bogged down by that. You cannot give advice to people who don't want it. That's why I very rarely like hand out my cards. Like I'll be walking down the street and, a dog will lunge at my face, and I can kind of read like if somebody's like, oh my gosh, I wish someone would help me. And if people are like, I'm the best trainer in the world. Like if you have someone that thinks they're the best trainer in the world, it doesn't matter that their dog just ate another trainer's face. They're not going to listen. So I would say choose your battles, save your breath, and, just kind of keep an eye on them. And also, if it's a dog that you're like close with, like lead by example, do stuff with the dog and show them how much the dog is enjoying things. But yeah, I mean, sometimes there's just nothing you can do, and you can't let it like keep you up at night because it would be too sad.
Yeah, people always wondering, wow, your dog is so well behaved, your dog is so this, your dog is so that, and mine is kind of barking and all over the place. Why? Why could that be? And,
Yeah. Yeah, people miss
why
like the work that goes into it. Like people see this and they're like, oh, I want a German Shepherd, so my dog can do that. Like this is 9 years of living with a professional trainer and also being like just a really, really good dog. Like, this doesn't happen easily. But a lot of people don't want to put in the work. They would rather charge their American Express for a daycare package than like get off the couch and do something with the dog. So to get back to that question about, how to find a dog that's a good fit for you, like find a dog that is going to succeed with what you're able to give it, whether it's your time resources or your financial resources. But I do encourage you to do like personal things and not just pay. Like a dog doesn't know that you spent $300 at PetSmart on new stuff for them. Like it's much more important to them that you take them for a walk or, teach them something. Anyone else?
Last question. Yay. Related to survival, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the service dogs and therapy dogs and about your opinion about fake service dogs.
Oh, okay. So right now, it's more people are figuring out that dogs can help us. Unfortunately, people that don't have the skill set may be well-meaning, and they go, oh, there's this dog that, he's so bored, he's chasing his tail, he's doing all this stuff, he just needs a job, and here's this veteran that needs a service dog. So here's a disabled person and a dog that's going crazy, let's put them together and it'll be great. But that's too idealistic. Like it takes a very special dog to do that type of work. There's no job harder than a service dog. They have to be impeccable in public. They have to listen to a handler who's not always able-bodied and like really able to be present and strong. So a lot of times there are people that really do try and they think they have a real service dog and it's just a bad match and they've gotten bad professional help and bad information. Then there's also the entitled, I'm just going to buy a service dog vest on the internet so my dog can be on the flight. Like, there's a special place in hell for people that do that. Like it really, it hurts so many people to do something that's selfish. You know, there will be people who are unable to have the dog that they literally depend on to save their lives. I was in an airport in Washington, D.C., and there were 3 other people with dogs on my flight, and the airline had a limit to how many service dogs there were. And because I had the biggest dog, I was first up to be bumped. I looked around at who these other service dogs were. I mean, it was not a service dog. It was not a disabled person. It was an entitled drunk guy with like an aggressive Pomeranian in a purse. Like it was infuriating to like be stuck in an airport and almost lose my seat because some guy wanted to bring, you know, his purse dog with him and not pay for it. So you really actually do hurt somebody when you're using a fake service dog, or a service dog is being called a service dog when it's not quite to the level. They're incredibly expensive to train. We've had dogs that have trained for over a year. They have all their tasks. They're doing wonderfully. One mistake, and we have to wash them. A lot of people have trouble letting go of that, either for the integrity of their organization, they like don't want to say they failed, or because the person's so emotionally invested in the dog that they don't want to let go. People just really need to self-regulate and be more responsible. This is not something I want to see regulated by government. They don't understand this stuff, and they're not going to be the best people to do it. It really needs to be the community stepping up and advocating for themselves. And even people like you that don't necessarily have a service dog, speaking up, standing up for people that have a service dog, educating people. You know, if you see someone out with a service vest and they're letting their dog jump on things and, you know, bark at people, inform the business, say, you know, you don't have to put up with that. That dog cannot act like that if it's a service dog. And don't let people have their rights trampled. Educate yourself as to what a service dog is allowed to do, what you're allowed to do with a service dog. You know, a lot of people know, like when they see the vest, they're not supposed to pet the dog. The number of people that have this like self-indulgent like urge to like just come grab the dog anyway, like, you know, I understand it. Like I'm the epitome of crazy dog lady, but you cannot do that. You know, these dogs are saving someone's life. Like he alerts to my migraines, and I have a few minutes to take medication and keep myself out of bed for the next 4 days or out of the hospital. So, you know, if you're over there like playing kissy face and trying to feed him peanuts on the airplane, like he could miss an attack coming and I could end up in the hospital. Like these dogs aren't here just to like entertain and, you know, socialize. And I know a lot of service dog handlers allow that kind of stuff, but even if people say it's okay, like don't indulge in it. Like just generally speaking, I don't pet other people's dogs. I don't, you know, come over and visit. Like there's times where it's appropriate. Like I brought Huck today to visit with everybody. That's his job today, and like he loves it, and y'all are welcome to visit with him. But like even out on a walk, like, you know, some of the people that ask like, what can I do with my dog? Even though that dog's not in a vest or anything, like that person is spending their 1 hour a day with their dog, and they're doing something. And I think it's good just to be more respectful and not interrupt it. You know, just because you want to pet a dog, or, you know, you like how it looks or you have questions, like really try and be more respectful. Like the European dog culture is much different than ours in that people can take their dogs out in public and like nobody touches them. Like, you know, they don't interfere. The dog is held to a higher standard of behavior, and so are the people. So if we can kind of start emulating that, I think more dogs would be in a good situation. I think too many dogs are put at risk because we expect them to put up with way too much. Like, you know, imagine you were out on a date and somebody comes up and like starts like groping your significant other and like, you know, wanting to talk to them and pet them and touch them and like, you know, like poke them in the ear and like pinch their cheeks. Like all that stuff's super rude, and like it would probably cause a physical fight in a lot of cases. But like that's what we're asking our dogs to do, and like that's what we're expecting dogs to tolerate every time we want to do that. Like we know that those boundaries are off limits with people, but we forget that with dogs. So I think it's important, whether a dog is a vested service dog or just a pet out with somebody, like really step back and like see what that person's doing, see what the dog is doing. Like I've been out with a Aussie who, was beautiful and spotted and different color eyes, and like he was terrified of people because everyone like invaded his space all the time. And I had people come up while he was growling with a muzzle on, being like, I just have to touch him. Like, no, you don't. So that's the kind of thing that like, I just encourage people to be really self-aware of like, are you being selfish? And like, do you really have to touch that dog? Do you really have to cross the street with your dog to say hi to another dog? That's why a lot of dogs end up in trouble. That's why a lot of dogs end up surrendered, because no boundaries are respected by anybody. So that's important, whether it's a working dog or just somebody's pet. Just kind of like back off and let the owners do their thing.